They paid cash for the house. The house, two of them, they paid cash. They worked for a few more years. She saved her money. They bought another house. They paid cash. Nearly everybody in that generation lived without debt. That generation, nearly everyone lived without debt. One-wage earner, no debt. Today, two-wage earners, they can't pay the interest on the loan. That's because of the gradual degradation of the economy. And we really need to move back to a country which doesn't live on debt. If you have to borrow money for your business to survive, maybe you should contract your business until you don't need to borrow money. But how are you going to pay that money back? One other point I want to make on interest rates. All the news says, hey, what are they going to do with the interest rates? Is the Fed going to lower? If they lower them anymore, they'll be giving the money away, right? Negative interest rates.
It should be where it is.
Will the Fed lower the interest rates? Will it help the stock market? Or are they going to raise them? You know, if the economy is getting better. What will the Fed do? It's not hard to figure, because what happens if the interest rates rise? Who is the largest debtor in the world? The United States Congress. They owe $13.5 trillion. Now, look at this, the numbers on this. The tax income is about $1 trillion. 5% interest is what the government has paid on money for the last 30 years on average. If they let interest rates go back to 5%, their interest bill is $650 billion. And at the $2 trillion a year they're running up, in 3 years it'll be $20 trillion. Meaning that at 5% interest, the ordinary interest rate the government has paid over the last 30 years, 3 years from now, every cent of tax money will go to interest. They're bankrupt.
Right.
So you're talking about a situation where a bankrupt entity, the government, has sent trillions to their friends in the banking industry. The government's bankrupt, the bankers are scared to death they'll be bankrupt, and the businessman is scared that he'll be bankrupt because of what has been done in the financial system. You've got to unravel this whole thing.
I think they ought to keep the interest rates low. I mean,
they have no choice. They will keep them low because their bankruptcy will be declared if they let them go up.
Just like Japan, they've had a low interest rate and they had it,
and
then they put it down to 0, and then they went up and everything was going, and
Japan has been in a depression for 15 years.
They're doing okay though.
Well, you can say you're doing okay. We're still eating.
But that's to keep things going. That's what they did to keep things going.
What we need to do more to keep things going is to get the government off our back so we can get them really going again.
But what do you do in the meantime if you're broke?
You get the government.
I mean,
you're going to stay broke if you leave these guys on your back.
A lot of people are hurting.
If you get the government off the backs of the American people, their economy will revive, and that doesn't mean people won't go broke. A businessman who handled his affairs so that he was not moving on the line may survive. A guy that's borrowed too much may go broke. The solution is instead to take our tax money and keep all these businesses in business. It's not going to work. They're just going to broke later. You can always point to someone. They pointed at General Motors. Oh, we can't let them go broke. Now, you know what would have happened if they declared an ordinary bankruptcy instead of this thing Obama arranged? General Motors had gone bankrupt and gone through the normal bankruptcy procedure. Somebody would have bought General Motors for what it was really worth, and they'd still be making cars. When you get on the internet, if you talk to somebody in another country, that communication goes through the fiber optics, mostly that was laid down by a company named Global Crossing. Now, one guy organized that company, he got the ships, the technology, he borrowed the money, and he tied all the countries of the world together with fiber optics, and we all benefit from it. But he borrowed too much money. So his company went broke.
Oh yeah,
so the company was bought by somebody else for what it was worth, and the fiber optics are still working, and they're still in business. What happens when someone with assets, say it's a business, anybody, it's a car business, whatever they're doing, some man sitting here with certain capital in business, if he handles his affairs in a way that causes him to go bankrupt because he can't borrow money or whatever he can't do, then if the business is needed by the community or by the nation, it's something that there's a demand for, someone else will buy the business at what it's really worth, and it'll keep right on doing its job. But if I go out into business and I borrow too much money, or I need to borrow money to pay my people next week, and I'm in this cycle, perhaps I I handle my affairs in such a way that somebody else should be running my business. That's the way free enterprise works. The other way is not really freedom. After the government passes enough money out, they own you. Think about the houses right now. They now own Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have 90% of the mortgages in the country. Who owns the house until it's paid off? The land. The U.S. government now owns the deed to 90% of the houses in the country. Do you think that's a healthy thing in a free country? Now Obama is talking about, and we understand the human reason that this is talked about. He's talking about, well, the people in these houses can't pay their mortgages. Maybe we'll just say that since we own the mortgages, we'll let it go for a while. We don't have to pay. Now they're living in a government house at no cost. That's the way the Soviet Union worked. They owned all the houses, they assign you to a house. Now you're going to be assigned to a government house. The government now owns the houses. This is not a good thing. The government should not be in the mortgage business. They should not own our homes.
Who's going to put a roof on it in 20 years?
Huh?
Who's going to put a roof on it in 20 years?
That's what happened in the Soviet Union. You know, the roofs leaked and the people were in breadlines. And I'm not pointing at the Soviets because of the Cold War and because, you know, we were taught to hate these people because we were competing. I'm talking about a socialist economy. And interestingly, those guys were pros. They knew how to run a socialist economy. It just didn't run well because that doesn't work. Free people work and produce, and people that are not free don't do a good job. But the situation, if you look at the mortgage thing, and there are all kinds of nefarious people in there. And a zillion of our tax dollars have been paid to them. This mortgage thing, there's a very good book on that out about the whole thing and about the guys who shorted the mortgage securities and how they made money. But the last paragraph in the book is very interesting because he goes through it all. He knew all the personalities and everything. He goes through it all and he says, the guys who shorted the mortgage market because they knew what was going to happen got rich. And the guys that didn't and bankrupted their companies got rich too.
Yeah.
Because they all knew somebody, they all had
gold.
golden parachutes, and most of the guys that bankrupted their companies also got rich. This is the past, and the money, if you trace it, came from our congressman, came from Washington. So the situation is not going to correct itself by saying the government must leap in and print and borrow the money to give loans to men and women who may have conducted their businesses in a way. Now, we must be honest. They were running. Take this businessman you're talking about. Can't get a loan. All right? And let's suppose the bank has the money, is willing to loan, but doesn't think he's a good risk. He's not getting the money. The bank is scared because of the economy, but anyway, he's not getting the loan. Is the best solution to say to them, and he's in trouble in part because of forces that he didn't control. Because he was running along his business apparently depends on loans, and he maybe wasn't playing it too close to the line, but things got suddenly worse and he didn't expect it. Still, if we reach in with the money of the man the money has to come from somewhere. So here's a businessman down the street that maybe saw it coming and didn't get into debt so bad. We're going to take the money away from the guy who ran his business more prudently and give it to the guy who didn't run his business prudently because we feel sorry for him. If we do that, and the government's the mediator, we'll never get our economy back.
He was the prudent man. All the rest of them in his industry went broke. And he was the only one that's left.
Well,
Now,
I don't know of any industries like that.
Well, how many
No, the
industries?
housing industry.
Housing industry is a disaster.
The housing industry is still a disaster, but the government made it